Happy 2024. Really proud to be here with so many distinguished leaders we'll introduce momentarily, but I'll give you a clue. One of them is our Attorney General who's joined us here today. So I want to thank Tish James for being here, an important part of what we're talking about here today. You know, I was thinking about when I wake up in the morning, woke up in Albany, a home that was once occupied by Franklin Roosevelt and Teddy Roosevelt. So I have all their images, their statues, their busts. And I thought about, again, what Teddy said. And the credit belongs to the man, and I've adjusted to the woman, who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and the sweat and the blood. And as we get on to this new year, we're jumping back into that arena, ready to carry on the work of the people. So I'm going to tell you that today we're going to begin the fight to make sure we can put money back in the pockets of New Yorkers and making our state, once and for all, a more affordable place to live. And again, I mentioned our Attorney General. I want to thank her for her incredible leadership. Everything we're talking about here today, her office has a major role in implementation, and I want to thank her for that. I also want to recognize my Superintendent of Financial Services. Adrian Harris has done an extraordinary job. Great leader. Carolyn Coffey, the Director of Economic Justice Litigation for Mobilization of Justice. Thank you, Carolyn, for joining us. The Carolyn fan club has arrived. It's great. And Beth Finkel, the New York State Director of AARP, so thank you. Also, we have the Chair of the Committee on Corporations and Authorities Commissions, Leroy Comrie, and Simon Alex Boris, and Clarissa Rodriguez, the Chair of the Compensation Board, and many others. But I wanted to just give you a little preview. I mean, everyone knows the State of the State is on the 9th. I've been thinking about this for a long time of what 24 initiatives will all be about, but I wanted to give some previews of some of the initiatives that take a little more time to explain. I don't want them to get lost in a longer narrative, but I want you to know how important this is to me. This is a plan, and this is not everything today, but it is a plan to really improve the quality of life for New Yorkers and make this state fairer and just more affordable. And an important part of that pillar is going to be our consumer protection and affordability agenda, and that's what we're talking about here today. We've made great progress. You know, what is affordability? It's more money in your pockets. And starting today or yesterday, phasing in an historic increase in the minimum wage. That's going to add so much more money, and I've always been so offended by the concept that people can work 40 hours a week and still fall below the federal poverty line. And so we're righting that wrong. And starting today in New York City and Westchester and Long Island, it is $16 an hour, $16. Across the rest of the state, it's $15. And there's scheduled increases all the way until 2027. And given how high inflation was last year and how it just knocked people back, those who even saw an increase in their paycheck, it was sucked up at the grocery counter or the gas pump. And so inflation was cruel. So I said from now on, starting in a couple of years, we're going to tag the minimum wage rate to inflation. So we don't have to always have a battle and debate and have to wait until we get it through. That's way it can be automatic tagged to inflation. So when prices go up, your pay goes up as well. And that's been talked about for years. Great idea. No one could get it done, but we did. And I'm really proud of that. So let's acknowledge that. What is a public service announcement? I'm going to tell you, if your pay did not go up and you're a minimum wage worker, our Department of Labor is waiting for your call, and they'll make sure you get the money that you are owed. But we're not just raising the floor on wages. We're talking about affordability across the board. And let's just look back over the last 2 years, you know, putting people back to work. Unemployment, when I first became governor, was 7%. It's a lot of people out of work, not bringing home that paycheck for their families. Today it's 4.3% and continuing to decline. And we're bringing in tens of thousands of good paying jobs so people don't have to work at the minimum wage level, that they can get the education, the skills they need to step into great jobs and have the money to set aside to invest in their futures. Also, affordability means paying less in taxes. We delivered property tax relief to over 2.5 million New Yorkers. And we look back over the last 2 years, if it's been all about putting more money in your pockets, today we're going to talk about keeping it there. And that starts with safeguarding people from predatory business practices used to bilk New Yorkers out of their hard-earned cash. Let me be clear. The vast majority of New York businesses are honest and fair. They provide essential goods and services. They enhance their communities. But in every sector, there are some rotten apples that spoil the whole bunch. And they can give industries a bad name, and they actually can hurt people in the process. So today we're putting those bad actors on notice. We're coming after you. You're done ripping New Yorkers off. We did not fight for better wages, better jobs, higher pay, to just watch unscrupulous companies make a buck off of misleading New Yorkers. Because if we didn't fight for New Yorkers, the swindlers would just get through all kinds of loopholes, like vultures descending on their prey. And I'm talking about everyone from student loan, those servicers who steer students to the higher. They steer the borrowers to not what's best for the student, but somehow they end up with the most expensive repayment option. That's going to end. Debt collectors who manipulate retired seniors into giving up their protected income. They need us to step up here, and that's what we're talking about today. We're also putting a stop to exploitative tactics, and that is a cornerstone of our entire project here today. But believe it or not, this is something that is rather shocking. There are only 7 states in America where abusive and unfair business practices are not covered by the law. Guess who's one of those 7? Guess who's no longer going to be one of the 7? And that is the state of New York. Today we're setting out to change that. So I'm proposing the first major expansion to New York's consumer protection laws in more than 40 years. That would make unfair and abusive practices illegal and give the Attorney General's office a path to punish predatory operators. And that's what. And it'll help deter the bad actors from using these practices that have cheated New Yorkers out of their hard-earned money and make sure it stays in their pockets. Also directing the Department of Financial Services, again led by our Superintendent Adrian Harris, to put stronger regulatory guardrails around the buy now, pay later loan industry. We know how that operates, and I want to thank our superintendent for her work in that. But there's another area which is so debilitating for families, New Yorkers. Just as you shouldn't have to fend off bad actors, you shouldn't face financial ruin if you're faced with a chronic illness like diabetes. People pay hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket expenses every year for medications and insulin just to keep them alive. Now, last year we signed a number of laws to help with the rising costs of medication, including protecting consumers from price gouging on prescription drugs. That's progress. We talked about that. This year we're proposing legislation to ban co-pays for insulin, just to ban them. This will be the most expansive insulin cost-sharing prohibition in the nation, and it'll give financial relief to over 1.6 million New Yorkers. I'm very proud of this one because every family we know, everybody knows someone who's been touched by diabetes. But insulin is hardly the only medical expense that can cripple you financially. Just missing work to get medical treatment can be enough to break the bank. And here's why. The maximum benefit for paid medical and disability leave has been capped at $170 a week for 35 years. That defies comprehension. Does anybody think the cost of living has gone up over the last 35 years? I mean, the last time the cap was raised, my daughter was born and she's 35. That comes out to $4.25 a week for a 40-hour work week. Who can live on that? Who can live on that? And remember, we pay for this our entire lives. You're paying into this fund, the employees and their employers. But what's the point of it if it doesn't help you when you need it to be there for you? New Yorkers deserve better. And if you're supposed to be thinking that $170 a week is going to replace your income, it's not going to work. If you take time off for care you need, you're forced to go into your retirement that you've been saving, go into the kids' savings for college, whatever you've been setting that aside for, all of a sudden it's gone. You might even miss a mortgage payment, start getting behind in everything else. So, and also pregnant New Yorkers are affected as well. More than 1/3 of medical leave claims are for pregnancy-related disabilities. So I'm proposing an amendment to our disability law to increase the maximum paid benefit over the next 5 years. And we're going to tie it to the statewide average weekly wage, just as we do for family leave. And that's going to be a dramatic increase. It'll be 67% of the weekly average for the state of New York, which comes out to about $1,250 a week instead of $170. So that's more than seven times greater. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you take care of people. Lifting them up when life throws them a curveball. Strengthening the safety net for those who get sick or hurt unexpectedly so they can get better without sacrificing everything they've worked so hard for. And another damaging byproduct of unplanned illness and injury, because it can happen to anyone, is medical debt. That's the last thing I want to talk about here today. Roughly 700,000 New Yorkers are in medical debt. Illness, injury, the bills add up, now they're in debt. And many people have to sometimes forego medical care because they know they just can't afford it. They live in pain, or they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars they just can't pay back. And so that's another hard choice they make. Now, we've already signed laws just recently scrubbing medical debt from credit reports. Beth was there, we did that. And banning providers from being able to garnish your wages. I mean, you realize I can't afford it, so they're just going to take it, no more. But we can do even more for New Yorkers. There are hospital assistance programs, help you pay that debt, but these programs often aren't enough. People can't make the big payments, and all of a sudden their debt spirals out of control. People even sometimes face lawsuits. Now, they're being harassed for lawsuits for amounts of money that they're never going to be able to repay, and they never could afford in the first place. So as part of our consumer protection and affordability agenda, I'm proposing legislation that would protect low-income New Yorkers from being sued for medical debt while limiting the size of the monthly payments and the interest providers can charge. We're also going to greatly expand those hospital financial assistance programs because more people need to be taking advantage of them. So these consumer protection and affordability actions represent the very first plank of our 2024 State of the State. Over the course of the next week, we'll be discussing another set of key issues facing New Yorkers: education, public health, and much more. And ultimately, these proposals are to have one objective: to make New York safer, more affordable, and more livable. And that'll help New Yorkers be strong, because when New Yorkers get knocked down, they get knocked down by illness, disability, unfair business practices, low wages. They need to know that their state, their governor, their legislature, their attorney general will have their back. And that's who we are as New Yorkers. And with that, I want to introduce another great champion for protecting consumer rights, our Attorney General, Tish James.
Thank you, Governor Hochul, for advancing the state of New York and for moving people from poverty to prosperity, and for focusing on consumer protection and affordability. We thank you so much on behalf of all New Yorkers. Thank you for your leadership, and we knew that it would take a woman, obviously, to focus on all of these issues. So thank you so much. And thank you for giving us a preview of your 2024 State of the Union. And so stay tuned. There's more to come. So let's give another round of applause to our governor. And I guess, and Governor, from the wild applause that you're getting, you can see that they're very popular. So thank you so much, and Happy New Year to everyone. And again, thank you, Governor Hochul, for this important announcement. We are standing here united in our commitment to protecting New Yorkers. And my office, as all of you know, have taken on countless companies for focusing on deceiving and harming New Yorkers. From predatory debt collectors to companies that price gouge to businesses that make promises that they know that they cannot keep. We've taken on opioid manufacturers and distributors and individuals who have deceived people about the real dangers of opioids. Companies that took advantage of the pandemic and other companies that engaged in price gouging, unfortunately, on essential goods during the pandemic. Companies that canceled services or misled consumers but refused to to provide them with refunds, and so much more. And the list goes on and on and on. And while we have been successful in stopping the most egregious and bad actors, there is still more that we can do to protect consumers and small businesses from harmful practices. And currently, New York law prohibits companies from using deceptive acts or practices in conducting their businesses. And this is consistent with the law in essentially every state in the country. It's known as UDAP, UDAP. But New York is one of only 8 states in the country, one of 8, that doesn't also provide protections against unfair or abusive business practices. And I have attended a number of Attorney General conferences, and Governor, I hate to be in the minority, and I hate that New York, unfortunately, is behind the ball. So thank you for this. This seemingly simple addition will significantly strengthen our ability to protect consumers and small businesses. And it will help in the cases that we bring where the conduct in question might not meet the criteria for deceptive, but is certainly unfair, abusive, and harmful to people or to small businesses. You see, it requires a company, we've got to prove that the company or entity made a representation. And often when it comes to unfair practices or abusive practices, there is no outright representation. They have to, these companies have to make a promise or imply that their product or their business will do a particular thing. And with this legislation, we will protect businesses, even where the businesses engage in harmful conduct that doesn't involve any type of representation. This new and critical addition would strengthen my office's ability to go after the countless unfair and abusive business practices New Yorkers experience every day. Let me just give you some examples, like marketing that exploits unsophisticated or vulnerable consumers or children, predatory lending practices like student loan services that intentionally steer borrowers to the most expensive loan plans. And I know that there were some students who are in here or individuals who are still paying off their student loans who made some noise earlier. So certainly you can understand this. Or bad actors or fraudsters who steal the deeds to family homes after an owner dies, or buying out one's heirs for pennies on the dollars. And this is happening all over this state, and unfortunately in communities where they are cash poor but equity rich, where they have seen so many changes in their community, and their brownstones now are valuable, and you see more and more criminals focusing on seniors and individuals who basically want to steal their deeds. Or even protecting consumers. And we've had a lot of discussion, and my office will be hosting a conference on AI, on the benefits, but also the dangers, specifically AI-generated decisions about lending, employment, or insurance coverage. And as you all know, one of the main concerns with respect to AI, which we will talk about at our conference, really focuses on the ability of this technology to discriminate against certain individuals or groups. These are just a few of the ways we can and will continue to protect hard-working families from predatory actors. And so I want to thank the governor for her leadership. I want to thank her for all that she is doing. I want to thank her for bringing our UDAP statutes into the 21st century. And I also want to thank Senator Comrie, who's joined us, as well as Assemblymember Weinstein and the chair of Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions, and Assemblymember Alex Borges for all that they are doing in Albany, focusing on protecting consumers and ensuring that New York stays affordable. And with that, it is my honor and my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Carolyn Coffey, who is the head of the Mobilization for Justice, one of their attorneys.
Hey, everyone. I'm Carolyn Coffey. I'm actually, you gave me a promotion. I'm only Director of Litigation for Economic Justice at Mobilization for Justice, but I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Governor, and it's wonderful to see the Attorney General and Senator Comrie and Assemblymember Boris and Superintendent Harris, so thank you so much. New York is known for being in the vanguard with regard to usury and laws that protect patients and homeowners and consumers facing debt collection. But as you heard, we can do so much more when it comes to even the most basic consumer protection. My organization provides free legal services to low-income New Yorkers, and we hear from New Yorkers who are desperate for help. We hear from them through our hotlines and at clinics and from constituent referrals every day. And our clients are people who are facing a wide range of problems related to every aspect of the marketplace: mortgage lending, student loan servicing, rent-to-own transactions, debt collection, credit reporting, automobile sales and financing, among others. Inevitably, the people contacting us for help have been subjected to unfair, abusive, and deceptive practices by unethical and predatory businesses. We see how unscrupulous businesses disproportionately target and extract wealth from communities of color, as well as seniors and people with disabilities and other vulnerabilities. We expend considerable, valuable resources trying to right the wrongs on behalf of our clients and to make them whole. It may not seem like much to someone to forego a $1,000 deposit as part of a bait and switch scheme, or for a person to lose $300 because of an unauthorized bank transaction. But those figures are really meaningful to our clients, and they're people who are trying to make ends meet. So too often what's happened to our clients is unfair and abusive, but not necessarily illegal, at least in New York. We have to explain that the laws on the books fail to protect them. So even New York's existing consumer protection law, which is supposed to be a gap filler that protects New Yorkers against evolving schemes in all economic spheres throughout the state, is out of date and out of step with the rest of the country. As you heard from the Attorney General and the Governor, the norm at the federal level and in most jurisdictions, we're talking New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Texas, Arkansas, is to protect people from unfair, abusive, and deceptive practices by unethical and predatory businesses. New York has really fallen behind. Small businesses, as well as everyday New Yorkers, deserve a fair marketplace where the entities that try to game the system or cut corners are not given a free pass, and where people who are harmed can be made whole. Banning unfair and abusive practices is both a matter of economic and racial justice. To promote a fair business climate, New York must modernize and ensure that its consumer protection law is as strong as it can be. So we applaud Governor Hochul's commitment to strengthening New York's existing consumer protection statute, and we stand ready to help her enact robust laws that help all New Yorkers. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Beth Finkel from AARP. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you particularly to Governor Hochul, who continually is an unbelievable advocate for older adults again and again in her long career of working for the people of New York State. I also want to thank our AG, Tish James. We've stood together many, many times on protecting older adults, and here we are again. I want to thank Senator Comrie, I want to thank Assemblymember Boris, and I also want to thank Adrienne Harris, who has also helped us learn so much about better ways to protect New Yorkers. So we're here today because AARP is the preeminent voice really for the 50 plus in this country. And we know that when people are having difficulty paying their bills, paying for their medications, it is always the older adult that usually suffers the most. In fact, 1 out of 5 older adults struggle to be able to pay their their drugs. And that just cannot continue. Older adults are on fixed incomes. It is very, very difficult for them to ever catch up if they fall behind. And then they have to make decisions about whether to take their medications and take half of it or even less. We also know that medication just doesn't work if you can't afford it. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And that's why we're so pleased to be here today with Governor Hochul's unveiling of the beginning of her 2024 agenda
And we are so proud to be able to stand here with her and support these strong protections. When we look at the UDAP issue and we look about how older adults, they are almost always the first people to become victims of fraudsters. And having this UDAP protections now beefed up is so, so essential to their survival, their economic survival, and really that of their families, because so often people live intergenerationally these days. So again, as ARP, we are so pleased to be here today and support these initiatives and stand up again with the governor. Thank you so much.